So first of all, this is what we call at SITTV an RLC event. And RLC stands for Residential Learning Community. And we try to have a couple of these a semester. An example would be a faculty open house, something of that nature. And it all goes towards our RLC accreditation. And what that is it's comprised of a couple of different facets. For us, it's a faculty fellow, so a faculty member from the school having a relationship with the chapter and being a mentor. It was Kevin Ryan for a while. He got very busy, so he pulled on Father Bob as well. In addition to that, now that he switched parishes, he won't be around a lot, so we're looking for a new one. In addition to that, we have a resident scholar. So what that is a grad student, either from Stevens or from another campus, not inherently SIGEP, who lives in the house. And the purpose of that is to be a positive influence of the chapter and to be able to sort of give us guidance in career preparedness and things of that nature. The last step is having substance-free common areas. For us, it's not really a big problem because the whole house is substance-free. But those are the three things that go into RLC accreditation. And through that, we try to have events like this. So I wanted to explain that first. And then now, for the actual event, the whole thought process behind this was that we're seeing on a lot of college campuses a pretty big dilemma now where chapters are getting shut down, having a lot of issues, whether it be drinking related, hazing related, anything of that nature. So we're trying to make sure that here at Stevens, where we haven't had problems of that magnitude at all, we're keeping it that way. So we wanted to invite President Farvardin in to talk to us about what leadership means and then how to apply it to weekly life on campus here. And the beautiful thing about that is it's not really a situation where we're like a Penn State level school where there's thousands and thousands and thousands of people here. We're able to have a really personal relationship with President Farvardin, all the students. When I say we, is what I mean. And because of that, we have fantastic events like this, like Pancakes with the President, and it gives everyone the opportunity to get to know President Farvardin. So on that note, in order to get to know President Farvardin more, I'm going to hand it over to him so he can talk about leadership.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you so very much. First of all, I want to thank the students who came to my office and had a discussion with me about inviting me to this event, and thank you for working with me to come up with the topic that we decide to speak about, leadership. I'd like to spend the bulk of my remarks talking about leadership. But I want to take advantage of the opportunity that I have to talk to a good number of students. How many do we have? 5, 25. It's more than 65. It's a terrific opportunity. As you all know, I love students. I have dedicated a good part of my life to interacting with students. And I cherish the opportunity to spend time with you. But when I have those opportunities, I try to convey some useful messages. So what I'd like to do to set the context and talk about leadership, I'd like to say a few words about me and my makeup, because there is no one way to be a good and effective leader. There are many ways to do that. I want you to know who I am and why I have the biases that I have and why I speak about leadership the way I'm going to speak about leadership. So first, I'll say a few words about me. Then I'll talk about the way I look at leadership and whatever pieces of advice I may have for you. And then I'd like to take this opportunity to say a few words about what you just talked about, the role of the Greek system in a good higher education system. Maybe I'll start by saying that you guys have, you're very special students, by the way. You know, I have spent 34 years of my formal career in higher education. I have actually spent a lot longer in education, less formally. But since 1983, I've been a faculty member. And I have interacted with literally hundreds of thousands of students. Some, of course, smaller number very closely, maybe thousands, maybe 10,000 or more, but with much larger populations of students informally and less closely. I was at the University of Maryland for 27 years, and that university in every given year has between 35 to 40,000 students. And I've seen generations after generations of those students. And of course, about 7 years at Stevens. Stevens students are very special. I am very proud of you. And I think those students who are involved with the Greek system, especially those who are involved with the Greek system at Stevens, are very different from those in most other universities. The Greek life at Stevens does a lot of good. By and large, it does a tremendous amount of good. I hope that you feel that you're learning something from your Greek experience. You have the opportunity to personalize your education. You have the opportunity to learn about things that you may otherwise not experience, such as the responsibility of running a house, such as the responsibility of managing conflicts between the people who live together, such as the responsibility of managing your finances, such as the responsibility of doing good to the neighbors, and a lot of those things, and such as the opportunity to build a close bond with other students who are within your house. That's a very special opportunity. Some of you may actually have interacted with members of the Board of Trustees of Stevens Institute of Technology who graduated many, many years ago. I know one or two of them have graduated more than 50 years ago, and they remain unbelievably proud and incredibly engaged with the fraternity that they lived with and they worked with, and with the brothers that they have known for more than 50 years. That really shaped the person that they are. And probably the same thing will happen to many of you. So with that, I'd like to start by telling you a little bit about myself. I was born and raised in Iran, a country that has been the subject of much media attention over the course of the past 38 years now, because in February of 1979, there was a revolution in Iran that actually changed the country altogether, and it changed the relationship of the regime that took over in that country with the rest of the world in a very dramatic way. Iran went from one end of the spectrum to the other end of the spectrum. I left the country 1 month before the climax of that revolution in January of 1979. So I've been here in the United States since then. But I was born there. I received a good part of my education there. Then I came to the US. I finished all my studies here. I became a faculty member in 1983 at the University of Maryland. I worked like a dog. I worked very hard. I want you to know that I come from a very modest background. I had fairly educated parents. I lost both of them in the past couple of years. They cared very much about my education, but we had very limited means. I had a speaker in my class. You all know that I teach a freshman seminar. So I had invited a speaker for my seminar last night, a gentleman who is the president and CEO of one of the largest construction companies in the country, the Whiting Turner Contracting Company. Look them up in case you don't know them. This gentleman, his name is Tim Reagan, is someone I've known for many years. He is a person for whom I have a tremendous amount of admiration. And he and I are almost exactly the same age, and we come from a very similar background. So after he gave his lecture last night to my students, I took him to the W Hotel and we had dinner together. And I want to tell you something that the two of us shared with each other for the first time that is a reflection of the kind of person I am. When I was growing up, as I told you, we had very modest means in our family. When I was growing up, at any point in time, I had one pair of shoes. One pair. I mean, for most of you, this might be funny, or it may not mean anything. But we would wear the shoes until there's a hole in the sole of the shoes. And then we would take it to a shoe repair place. They would remove the old sole and they would put a new sole. And then we continue to wear the shoes until they're useless. And then at that point, we would buy a new pair. So when I came to this country, I came with very little resources. Very, very little resources. To be specific, I came with $3,000. And I was completely new to this country. I didn't know the culture. I didn't know the language. I didn't know how higher education system worked. I didn't know the difference between a public university and a private university. I didn't know that there are universities that are more expensive and those that are less expensive. I just ended up going to a ridiculously expensive place for which I didn't have enough money. A month after I left my country, a revolution happened. And even the limited resources that my parents had were not allowed to be sent to support me after 1 month. So I came here in January of 1979. By August of 1979, I had run out of money altogether. Zero. There was a week that I thought I may not be able to eat. So I'm not telling you all these things so you commiserate for me, but to tell you that I worked very hard because I needed to work very hard, because I needed to support myself, and then later on my family. That's one of the pillars of success for a lot of people. So I came here in 1979, became a faculty member in 83. I worked like a dog. I worked my way up. I started as an assistant professor. Very quickly, I became an associate professor. Very quickly thereafter, I became a full professor. A year after that, I was appointed chairman of the Department of Electrical Engineering. I remained chairman of the department for 6 years. I was promoted to dean of engineering at the University of Maryland. I stayed dean for 7 years. Then I was promoted to provost and senior vice president for academic affairs. So I was running the entire university. And then I came to Stevens Institute of Technology. One of the things that I will come back to throughout my comments is that in my career and in my personal life, I can only count maybe half a dozen instances that actually shaped my personality and made me the person that I am. Half a dozen distinct events. I'm not going to recount all of them for you, but these events were fateful. They changed the way I think about the world. They changed my outlook. They put me in a situation of discomfort. And then after that, they put me in an environment where I could grow and I could become a better human being. I bet you exactly the same thing will happen to each and every one of you. There will be some very distinct and discrete situations in your lives that will test you. You will fail some of these tests. And in some cases, you will succeed. Those cumulative successes and the learnings from the failures will make you the person that you will be. I can't tell you exactly what those events are. I don't exactly know how you will be dealing with them. But I'm telling you, when they happen, remember that the president of your university told you this. As a result of these experiences that I have had, there are 4 things that I have learned in my life that I consider critically important, that have been critically important for my success. They may or may not apply to you. But I would say I have a lot of confidence that these principles, these key these key attributes usually help a lot of people become successful. What are they? So I want you to remember these four. These four are important because they made me who I am. I would say the first and probably the most important thing is acting with integrity. And by the way, it's easy to say, it's easy to use the word integrity, and it's kind of easy to say acting with integrity. All of us should act with integrity. Does anybody disagree, by the way? Does anybody dare disagree? Okay, but in reality, the definition of integrity is somewhat vague. And acting with integrity is not necessarily that easy. You're put in some very difficult situations where you're not really sure what you need to do in order to be acting with integrity. But the simplest way I can describe this is to do the right thing even when nobody is watching you. That's what I mean by acting with integrity. So that's number one. Number two, you've heard it from me already, hard work. I don't care how smart you are. I don't care how fast you learn. I don't care about the extent of your knowledge. All of these, of course, are important for success. But if you're not willing to really work hard, to put your heart and soul behind what is going to define your success, I would doubt it that you can become as successful as you want to be. Integrity and hard work. The third thing is related to what I call courage. Courage. Remember I told you there were a small number of distinct events in my personal life and in my career which made me the person that I am? Well, in all of those cases, I had to apply some level of courage in order to learn from those special circumstances and to come out of those special circumstances better than I went into them. It is easy. It's very easy. It's very tempting for all of us to stay within our comfort zone. I always tell my students, Jake, do you remember? Anytime I have a captive audience of students, I encourage them, especially because you're young, I encourage them to give themselves opportunities to cleverly step outside their comfort zone when an appropriate opportunity arises. There is this very strong temptation for all of us to stay within our comfort zone. And I'm myself a victim of it. Several times in my life, I have shied away from stepping outside my comfort zone because I was just so comfortable in there. That requires a little bit of a courage. So integrity, hard work, and courage. And the fourth thing that has helped me tremendously throughout my life, and this is something that I owe to my father, was the value of good friendship. My friends have lifted me up, sometimes because I needed their help, sometimes on a completely voluntary basis. I didn't ask for their help. You know how I became the president of this university? I didn't apply to become president of Stevens. A friend of mine who knew this university and who cared about this university and who knew me nominated me. And another friend of mine who knew me contacted the chairman of the board at the time, and he said, this guy is a good guy. I became the president of this university only because of the proactive measures that two good friends took. Friends can lift you up. Friends can do a lot of good for you. So pick your friends very carefully. I think I've done a good job in that area. I was a little kid when my father always advised me about my choice of friends. And I think that has served me well. So now, with that, I want to talk about leadership. And I'm going to make it very simple and rather informal so that at the end of the session, you can ask me questions. So I'm simplifying leadership in the form of let's say seven key attributes of what I consider to be a good leader. Okay? I do not claim to have a crystal ball and have a perfect definition of what it means to be a good leader, or what are the exact attributes to make a person a good leader. This is my own version. I reserve the right to be wrong, all right? But I hope you understand and appreciate the fact that what I'm telling you is totally influenced by my own personal experiences. If you talk to another successful person in a position of leadership, their version of leadership might be very different from mine, okay? And so these 7 things I'm actually going to write on the board. These are things that I have personally experienced. And by the way, I think I told you, I became chairman of the Department of Electrical Engineering at the University of Maryland in 1994. And after that, I became dean. After that, I became provost. And after that, I became president. So since 1994, I've been having some sort of a leadership responsibility. 23 years. All right, so the first thing is the importance of what I call vision and execution. We all know that successful leaders are people who are able to develop, define, communicate a vision for the organization they lead. Isn't that true? Everybody agrees with that. We also know that successful leaders are those people who have the ability to take a vision, a compelling vision, and convert it to practice. What most people don't think about is that the great majority of people are not good in both. I have come across a lot of people who are unbelievable visionaries. They come up with these incredible ideas that are just very suitable for the organization. And they are horrible, absolutely horrible, when it comes to taking that vision and converting it into reality. There are some other people, typically these people are called chief operating officers in many organizations, who are kind of very bland. They're not visionaries at all. But they're very good. You give them a task, they are terrific in taking that task and converting them into action and generating results. In my book, a good leader is a person who can strike a balance between these two qualities. Thomas Edison said, vision without implementation is hallucination. And I completely agree with him. Vision without implementation is hallucination. We don't want to hallucinate. A good leader is a person who has the ability to strike a good balance between developing a compelling, useful vision that he or she can use to mobilize the organization around, and at the same time deliver results by implementing that vision and putting it into practice. That's number one. Number two, again, you have heard this from me before because this comes from the experience that I've had. Number two is essentially related to integrity. But I'm going to write it a little bit differently here. Earn the trust of the organization through integrity humility, honesty, and sincerity. I don't know why this is quitting on me, this pen, but we'll find another one. Essentially, there are a few important words here. Of course, the most important of which is integrity. I don't think a person without integrity can ever earn the trust of the organization. And I'm confident if you don't have the trust of the people you want to lead, you cannot lead them. You might lead them in the short term. I would call that fake leadership. Long term, it's impossible. But in addition to integrity, I think these other words that I'm using, humility, honesty, and sincerity, they go a long way in earning the trust of the community. A very important aspect of effective leadership is the ability to get the trust of the people you lead and you work for. This is key. So in your Greek houses, keep that in the back of your mind. You can start small in a house with 25 students, earn the trust of your fellow brothers and sisters, and then later on you will assume bigger responsibilities, and always remember, you need the trust of the people you work for. I have this very interesting quote from Senator Simpson that if you haven't heard, you should hear. He said, if you have integrity, nothing else matters. If you don't have integrity, nothing else matters. There's nothing more important than integrity. All right, number 3. I think good leaders are people who have the ability to communicate, to articulate their ideas, to listen, to inspire, to instill hope, to mobilize, and to get the community to support the leader and work together toward that common goal. So I'll simplify this and I'll say effective communication. But you know what I mean. Communicate, inspire. Part of communication is also listening. Communication is two-way. You know, every time that I put down one of these, you may want to ask yourself, what if there is a person who does a great job of developing a vision and striking a balance between vision and execution, and a person with high integrity, but this person is extremely weak in communicating, extremely weak in inspiring? I would say that's a major deficiency. It really is. There is this interesting thing that I was reading from George Bernard Shaw, and this is about communication. And he said the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. Because sometimes you communicate, you think people in your audience have actually heard you. The truth is that the majority of the people have not. You all know how many emails we send students. And you all know how often you get them in one ear and you let them out from the other ear. My fault. We haven't communicated enough. It's not enough to just send that email. You should send 15 of them. And that is not enough. You should communicate via social media. And even that is not enough. You should find an audience like this and repeat the same thing to them until it sinks in. Communication is a very difficult thing. Okay, the fourth one is, again, a repeat of what I have said before. Demonstrate courage and take, I have a problem here. And take calculated risk. I want to share with you a little story that I have shared with some students before. I was 9 years old, 3rd grade, and one day my teacher came to me and she said, such and such classmate of mine was really struggling with math. She was from a very poor family. My math was good at the time. And she said, would you be willing to tutor your classmate? 9 years old. To be honest with you, I will never forget that day. You know, you're 9 years old, you're very impressionable. Your teacher thinks so highly of you to ask you to do something like this, but something I'd never done anything like that in my life. I had a very strange feeling. I felt kind of great that the teacher is thinking so highly of me, and I panicked at the same time. What does this mean? What should I do? How would I be evaluated? I went home, spoke with my parents, and I was hoping they would say, no, you should not do this, because that way I would have gone back to my teacher and I would have said, my parents said no. I would have had a good excuse. Well, unfortunately, both of my parents strongly urged me to do this. They said, this is great, you will do good to your classmate, this is a new experience for yourself. That was an opportunity for me to step outside my comfort zone. I was very comfortable. I was a great student. I was enjoying my class. I was having fun in the 3rd grade. I didn't need this. I was pushed outside my comfort zone, partly by my teacher, partly by my parents. But I would say I also demonstrated a little bit of courage by accepting it. It's a terrific experience. It was a life-changing experience at age 9. It was actually one of those small number of events that made me the person that I am. You could say that I took a little bit of a risk, and I did. I'll tell you one other thing. It was many years ago. In a very short period of time, I assumed a professional responsibility that changed the magnitude of my job by a factor of 10. I got married, and I started a new company all within a period of 4 months. I tell you, that was tough. I have this new wife who's very demanding. She wants a little bit of my time. I have a job that is almost 10 times bigger than the job I had prior to that. And I started a company, and I knew nothing about starting a company. This company went from 0 employees to about 50 employees within a period of 9 months. It was an unbelievable experience. I definitely stepped outside my comfort zone there. I demonstrated courage, and I definitely took risk. That's necessary from time to time. I don't suggest that you do that every day. I don't suggest that you do this lightly. But when the opportunity arises, when you've done your homework and you think this is the time to dive right in, you should do it. There's something that I spoke about, but I didn't write it here. So this is number 3. This is number 4. This is number 5. And I forgot to write number 2. Number 2 is related to the hard work, which we talked about. The leaders that I know of, every single one of them, for whom I have respect, they're hardworking people, they are intense individuals, they're kind of relentless and absolutely determined to succeed. Work hard and be unrelenting. These people tend to be, I use the word intense, I really mean it. but they also tend to exude energy. These incredible leaders, how many of you have heard of Elon Musk? Do you consider him a leader? I consider him a leader. I mean, every time this guy speaks at a distance, 3,000 miles from me, I feel energized. Think about the people who work with him every day. Must be an unbelievable experience. Or Steve Jobs. I mean, he had a lot of bad qualities, Steve Jobs, as a person. But he definitely energized everybody around him. Like probably no other leader. Okay, so we've done 5, 6. We're getting close to the end of my speech. 6th is motivated by an experience that I had soon after I became Dean of Engineering. This is 2000. When I became Dean of Engineering, the name of the school that I became responsible for was the A. James Clark School of Engineering. You may remember that about a week ago, an announcement was made at Stevens that we've received a $15 million scholarship gift to establish what is called Clark Scholarship. Does anybody remember this? There was a little bit of an email. We didn't repeat it 15 times, but this is good news. Let me take this opportunity to repeat this. About a week ago, we announced that Stevens has received a $15 million gift from one donor. The name of the donor is A. James Clark, and that is to establish scholarships for hardworking engineering students from underserved communities. It's the same Mr. Clark that I became the dean of his School of Engineering. It was at the University of Maryland. So soon after I became dean, I had a meeting with Mr. Clark in his office. And the purpose of this meeting was for me to give him a little update about the state of the school and to get to know him better. I had known him, but not very well. But now that I had become dean, I was supposed to get to know him much better, meet him from time to time, give him reports, and all of that. So after I gave my presentation about the school, Mr. Clark said, we were in his conference room. Mr. Clark said, can we go to my office for a private conversation? Because in the conference room, there were other people too. I said, sure, of course. We went to his office. He was very complimentary about the presentation that I had given. He said, he was a very serious man. He said, I'm very impressed by who you are, by what you have accomplished, by the vision you have developed for the school that carries my name, by your work ethics. He said all of these positive things. I was feeling good. Then he reached out and he put his arm on my shoulder over here. And he sort of held me tight, like this. And he said, but you know, I don't care how smart you are and how visionary you are and how hardworking you are. He said, surround yourself with the best people. Doesn't matter how hardworking you are. If you're not surrounded by the best people, you can't take my school to the level that it needs to go. And all along, he kept his arm on my shoulder. And he was looking, he had this penetrating way of looking in my eyes. I mean, it really meant something to me. I was almost melting. And that became a theme. And I remained in very close contact with Mr. Clark until 2 years ago when he passed away. So almost for 15 years. And in these 15 years, he always reminded of the importance of surrounding yourself with the best people. And he always gave me his own personal experiences with the best people he had surrounded himself with. And by the way, he came to Stevens. When I came to Stevens, after 2-3 months, there was an inauguration ceremony. And Mr. Clark actually came to my inauguration ceremony. And in that ceremony, he reminded me yet one more time of the importance of surrounding myself by good people. So that's lesson number 6. That's a quality of leaders. And finally, I have something that you probably have not thought about. I think none of these is actually surprising to you. You probably have either thought of them or you've heard from others about these leadership qualities. The 7th one is my own. I really think it's my own. And that is selflessness. So let me write it down and tell you what I mean by that. Those leaders that I have a lot of respect for, they kind of dedicate themselves to the organization that they work for. They dedicate themselves to the people. They do the work. They do the dog work that I was talking about. They make all the difficult decisions, not to promote themselves, not for any personal benefit, but for the good of the organization. They really love what they do. Now, oftentimes, they benefit from the good work that they do. They get a lot of personal gratification. They get financially rewarded. Their reputation gets enhanced. There is a tremendous amount of benefit that they get out of it. But that's not their primary objective. Their primary objective is to do good for the organization. They do this totally selflessly. And yet, they get personal benefit out of it, which is perfectly fine. There are some other people who take the helm of an organization and their primary objective is self-promotion. I don't call those people leaders. They might call themselves leaders, but I don't. You know, in terms of approaching problems, I have something that I've learned over the years. I've learned that usually when somebody comes to you with the statement of a problem, that person is not giving you the entire story. So I've learned that approaching a problem is that of looking at the problem from the perspective from multiple perspectives. So that's the first thing that I would do in approaching the problem. So if I'm telling you that there's a problem with excessive drinking in Greek houses, I would suggest that if you want to approach this, you first will talk to a variety of people. So that's the first part of your question. The second part of the question, how would you go about solving the problem? That, of course, depends on the nature of the problem. But typically what I try to do in solving problems, and you know, I solve problems almost every day. Most of them are small problems and relatively easy to solve. From time to time, they're big problems. I've had some at Stevens. I've had some in my previous jobs. When I deal with a big problem, I take it seriously and I find a correspondingly big solution for it. Okay? I put together a group of thoughtful people. I have learned over the years that I learn from others. And the more smart people give me input, the better my final decision is. By the way, I'm glad you asked this question because I want to digress a little bit and say something which is also related to leadership. Sometimes people think of leaders as those individuals who are very decisive. A problem comes up, they come up with this quick solution and they implement it. I don't believe in that. I think difficult problems need the requisite amount of time to find the right solution. You need to understand the problem well. You need to evaluate various aspects of this. You need to understand the pros and cons of the different solutions. You need to get input from a lot of the good solutions usually evolve. Those are the best solutions. That's a very good one. First of all, I should say you are very fortunate in that you live in a country where failure is not really frowned upon like it is in most of the rest of the world. If you look at some of these super successful entrepreneurs, Steve Jobs is a perfect example. He had one huge failure. You know, he started Apple. I don't know if you know this or not. Made Apple very successful, and then they kicked him out of the company. Did you know that? Steve Jobs started Apple Computer, the most revolutionary hardware system ever invented. He made the company super successful. And then his own board kicked him out of the company altogether. And then in desperation, they brought him back. I don't know when that was, 1997, 1998, because the company was going bankrupt without Steve Jobs. And he built this new version of the computer, of the company that is unbelievably successful. Failure by itself is not bad. You should not shy away from it. I'm not suggesting yet that you take stupid risks in order to fail. That is obviously not a good game plan. But you can take risk with the understanding that this endeavor that you're engaging in may end up not being successful. It may be successful, but maybe not. And that's perfectly fine. So long as when you fail, you learn from that failure, you become a better person, and next time you take an initiative, you do a better job of succeeding. You're young. If you're not prepared to take risk and fail right now, when you reach my age, you will never do it, because you have a lot more at stake. I can't afford to lose my job. I'm adjusted to my style of living right now. I have a family to take care of. You don't have that many responsibilities. This is the time for all of you to take risk. And God forbid, if you're going to fail, so be it. You will fail, and then you will stand up again, and you'll do something new. It's perfectly fine. That's the American way of doing things. That's a very good question. The answer to that question is yes, but not in a very serious way. There's betrayal and there's betrayal, right? There's backstabbing and there's backstabbing. You know, these kind of challenges, these kinds of difficulties in working with colleagues, they will arise in the career of each and every one of you. And I experienced them several times. As I said, in no case did I really have a very, very big problem. In several cases, small problems. How did I deal with them? I don't want to sound like I'm giving myself a lot of credit, and I really don't, because I've also made a lot of mistakes. But I think in general, I'm a forgiving person. And I have learned that there is more joy and gratification in forgiveness than in revenge. So in most of those cases, I was able to forgive the person. And I think in the long term, it helped me. But there's one other thing that I would add. I've always been relatively focused in my life. I have known where I want to go. So I never allowed these disturbances to deter me from achieving that goal that I was focused on. And that always helped me. I continued to move in that direction Sometimes I was slowed down. Sometimes maybe I was diverted a little bit. But I found my way because I knew where I wanted to go. That's a very good question. That's an excellent question. So first I will tell you a feeling that I have, and then I'll respond to your question. The feeling that I have as a president is a very lonely feeling. You know, the higher up you go in the organization until actually you become the person at the very helm, the lonelier you become. People become so much more careful about what they tell you. And you have to become so much more careful about what you say, because everything that you say is gospel. People interpret things that you say in too serious a way. You can't be a normal human being. You know, a normal human being makes mistakes. So I try to find ways to circumvent my loneliness. So you may or may not know, but I find opportunities, sometimes artificially, to interact with students. If you look around the country, there aren't very many university presidents who teach every semester. I teach every semester. So I've concocted this freshman level course that allows me to do two things. First, I spend time with the students in this class. I have about 20, 25 students. Jake was one of the students in my class. And we had a great time together, and this was 2 years ago. He was in my class fall of 2015, right? But we've remained friends, and now I have about 75 friends like Jake. I know them by their first name. I stay in contact with them. They tell me about their life. They tell me about interesting initiatives. For example, he took this Summer Leadership Institute in Richmond, Virginia, was it? And he felt like he could come see me in my office and tell me about his experience. Or another student went to Thailand, and he came and told me about his experience in Thailand. So this way I remain connected with the students, and I keep my own personal humanity. The other advantage of it is that students don't hide things from me. If there's a problem, they're actually the first to tell me about the problem. Whereas if I didn't stay in touch with students, others may try to either hide the problems or present them somewhat differently. So finding ways to keep in touch with the people that you work for, in my opinion, is the best way to keep your humanity. Now, I talked about students because, of course, they are our primary clients. But every month, I have a meeting with one little group in the university. I meet with the people who do the grounds, for example. I meet with people in the admissions office. I meet with the faculty members in mechanical engineering. I meet with police officers. So they know that I am not a figurehead. I'm somebody who cares about them. And I'm somebody they can have a glass of beer with. But all of us are above 21.